Is the lore of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 too confusing? Well, after a lot of the reveals from this new Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Aionios Moments Artbook, and especially from the interview we got with Tetsuya Takahashi, that is a question that I want to pose to you guys today and kind of discuss in today's video. Hey guys, Nishquick here. And based on the title and the question I posed in the beginning of the video, you guys already know where this is going. Is the lore of Xenoblade 3 too confusing? So recently, the art book of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which expands on the lore of not only Xenoblade 3, but all three of the games, has recently released. And there was a really interesting interview from Mr. Takahashi himself. And I'm not gonna do like a breakdown or a deep analysis on this interview. A lot of people have already done it. You got Paragon of Torna, Luxon, and JB Sphere Freak. Those are videos that I've watched on my own to kind of get an idea of what Takahashi is trying to say here. But I'm going to pose some questions in this video and take some aspects from this interview and pose the question as to, was this really presented to us properly? Was this presented to us in a good enough and smooth enough way for us to understand? And as many of you guys know, I love Xenoblade 3. I still love Xenoblade 3. So I'm going to be mostly on the side of Xenoblade 3 and say, hey, a lot of this honestly kind of makes sense. But I'm also going to play devil's advocate a bit and understand a little bit of where people are coming from with a little bit of this confusion, because online, on Twitter, on YouTube, and even amongst some of my friends, there has been a little bit of confusion as to what a lot of this really means, especially relating to a certain few characters and a certain few situations within Xenoblade 3. So if you guys feel this way, if you guys want more kind of lore analysis, story analysis from the Xenoblade Chronicles series, make sure to subscribe to this channel, because I have a lot more Xenoblade videos in my mind and up my sleeve, which I'm ready to put out soon and throughout the course of this year. And give this video a like, it helps me out a ton. Also, while you're at it, maybe check out channel memberships, because I have some awesome perks for you guys there as well. Without further ado, let's get started on this video. So before I go any further and talk about anything specifically, I just wanted to get my overall thoughts on this subject. In my opinion, especially after Future Redeemed, a lot of the confusing lore, a lot of the unanswered questions for Xenoblade 3 were answered, and I feel satisfied with a lot of this. But of course, there is going to be nitty-gritty, small bits of information and small bits of lore that we may not understand, or we may never come to understand at all. And to me, that's honestly okay, because a lot of this lore, a lot of this storytelling that Xenoblade 3 is doing is not really to say like, oh, here's how everything is going to connect, here's all the giant web of interconnectivity from all these three games. It's a lot of lore and loose symbolism which more or less ties into the overall message and themes of the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'll explain more of that later in this video, and I've seen a little bit of contention over that. I want to start off with the most surprising bit of information, and that is the fact that Fiora is inside Lucky 7. Fiora herself, only Fiora. Because a lot of us, especially me when I finished off Future Redeemed, when I listened to Riku, when I heard what Riku had to say to Shulk and to Matthew about Lucky 7, and hence the name Lucky 7 itself, with it being kind of forged by Riku and Melia, all of that information led a lot of us to believe that it has the 7 party members of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Minus maybe Melia and Shulk, because they appear in Aionios itself. Then who else would be there? My thoughts were, of course, Rein, Charla, Dunban, Ricky, Fiora, and maybe 2 other people who are really important to Melia. Maybe Tyrea and Tilin or Kino, Nene, anyone like that. Turns out the only person inside of this entire sword is Fiora. And to me, like I said before, how a lot of this stuff is kind of revealed very loosely in the game, it sort of ties back to the whole origin avatar thing, and how certain souls, not necessarily people, but certain souls reside in parts of Origin and within Origin Metal itself. I remember, I think, near the end of Xenoblade 3, when Noah and the whole party enters Origin, Noah can hear Lucky 7 kind of guiding him in the right way. So ever since then, I had this inkling of a feeling. Something is inside the sword, some kind of conscious is inside the sword, guiding Noah in the right direction. And even in the beginning of the game, when Noah says something is wrong, something is not right, a lot of that feeling comes from Lucky 7 itself. So I always knew that someone or something was inside the sword. Turns out it was one person instead of 6 other people. My issue with this is it's strange how nothing in the story really hinted at Fiora herself being inside the sword. And the more I looked into this situation, the more I noticed that this could have been a massive localization and translation mistake, because every time Riku mentions the people inside of Lucky 7, he mentions it as a plural. He says, there are people inside the sword. Everyone is here. So he mentions it as like a collective consciousness inside of the sword, instead of she is here or one singular person is inside the sword. I think that's a pretty major misstep in this whole localization of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, because not only does that give us the wrong information, but it threw off a lot of our theories as to what Lucky 7 is and what its purpose in the story is. But back to the whole idea of Fiora being inside the sword, I saw a lot of people say like, what the heck, this is so random. Why is Fiora here? Fiora deserves better. Fiora should have been more of an important factor in the story of Xenoblade 3 instead of just being inside the sword and Takahashi saying, oh, she's been here all along. I can understand that, but here's how I understood Xenoblade 3. Remember what I said before about a lot of the lore of Xenoblade 3 is kind of loosely tying into the themes of the story. There's a lot of symbolism in 3's story, and it's always tying into the theme of the younger generation picking up the legacy of the older generation and breaking free of the shackles that is placed on them. When Shulk, Ryan, Dunban, Rex, Zeke, Nia, when these people aren't around, the new ones, the younger people, they need to pull the world towards a better tomorrow. But honestly, they're going to need some support. They're going to need some support as well. It makes sense that some of their souls would be inside very important artifacts within Aionios, within Origin Metal, to still fulfill a purpose that they want to fulfill. A lot of people will say, hey, maybe Dromark is inside of the Cloud Keep. Maybe Dromark is the Cloud Keep itself. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cloud Keep is kind of constructed by Origin Metal and Dromark's soul is inside to protect Nia. But that brings me back to the question, once again, why Fiora? Why Fiora of all people? Well, here's the thing. Numa is inside of the gauntlets, and Numa's core gave power to the whole concept and power of Ouroboros. But Fiora is also a Monado wielder. You see, in Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade 1's world, Bionis and Mechonis, didn't have the Trinity processor. But it had a Trinity. And I'm not talking about Zanza's mini Trinity of Dixon, Lorithia, and Alvis, no. I'm talking about the Trinity that governs the world of Xenoblade 1. That is Zanza Maineth, just like Rex says in Future Redeemed. Logos is the male side, Numa is the female side, Ontos stands somewhere in between. And you have these 3 people within Bionis to kind of set things in motion, to kind of govern the land and the world. And Fiora had Maineth inside of her. Fiora had this purpose that she had to fulfill, or she was given to fulfill within the world of Xenoblade 1. And with some of Fiora's Maineth powers probably still remaining, I think that lends into her being part of Lucky 7. But taking this back to Numa and the whole Sword of the End and Noah's entire blade to begin with, it really ties back into Xenoblade 3's symbolism. Symbolism is what this game is all about. Noah's main weapon is powered by Fiora with Lucky 7 and Pyra and Mithra with the gauntlets, who lend them his strength. Numa is Lucky 7, and this whole Sword of the End is basically the Numa sword. And I find that so cool. You see so many times in the game Noah fighting N, and we also know that Logos is inside N's sword, so it's oftentimes that we get Numa and Logos fighting. And when I call Lucky 7 / the Sword of the End the Numa sword, I mean that as the Pyra and Mithra sword, who are definitely Numa, but Fiora and Maineth sort of take that Numa role and take that Numa position within the world of Xenoblade 1 with that trinity that is established there as well. So it's pretty iconic that we still get Logos and Numa fighting in Xenoblade 3, but it's in a very different way. So is a lot of this confusing? Yeah, it kind of is, but is it also explained in the game? Yes, it is, very loosely. It's not outright said, hey, Pyra and Mithra are in the gauntlets. We see the core emanate from the gauntlets, so we can assume that they are. It's never said Fiora is explicitly in the blade. Well, maybe with some mistranslations, and maybe some Japanese players might have understood that in a different way as well. But I also don't really think that many of us really needed to know that to understand the full message and the themes and the whole story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Because Xenoblade 3 is all about the party defeating Mobius, breaking free from the shackles that Mobius has placed on them, and looking ahead to a new future, a brighter future, which they can shape themselves without people restricting them and putting boundaries in their way. And these are just the tools that they use to go about such things, whether it's the Ouroboros stones that give them Ouroboros powers, whether it's the gauntlets that give Matthew the Ouroboros energy to fight toe-to-toe with Alpha and N, or whether it's Lucky 7 that houses Logos on N's side or Fiora on Noah's side to help drive home their motives and ideals of how the world should be. It is a little weird that souls reside within objects like this. Even Takahashi himself said, oh, maybe in some of the origin gears that you find around the world, maybe Ryan or Charla or any other party member could be inside one of those. It might feel like a cop-out answer, but symbolically to me, with how Aionios works as sort of like a world created by origin, to me, it still sort of makes sense, and it still ties back into the overall symbolism, lore, and story and message of Xenoblade 3. I think the funniest thing about the whole Fiora situation, though, is during this interview, when Takahashi drops this bit of lore that Fiora is inside Lucky 7, a lot of the other people within the room, especially even Kojima, who's one of the directors of Xenoblade 3, he was there and he didn't even know about this. So I find that crazy. What other lore and what other bits of information is Takahashi hiding from not only us as the fans, but his development team? And that's where some of the confusion might lie. With a lot of this mistranslation stuff, with a lot of this unclear information here and there, I can sort of understand where people are coming from, where a lot of this is confusing and unclear, and especially even from the development side. So I think going forward, if Takahashi has a lot of lore that he wants to put into this series and these stories, maybe he should be a little bit more open with his development team so everyone is sort of on the same page. Next thing I want to talk about is Riku himself, because a lot of people were, I wouldn't say irritated with Riku, but kind of confused as to why Riku is behaving the way he is. And when this interview came out and Takahashi dropped the big bomb that Riku was lying this entire time, a lot of people were a little upset with that as well. And again, sort of confused. Why is Riku doing this? Well, first of all, Luxon has an entire video about this, an entire feature-length film about Riku, basically. But I noticed a lot of Riku's shadiness throughout the story, and to me, it kind of made sense. And the reason is, Riku sort of acted like I don't know how to say it, sort of like the old mentor or like the old wise man of the hero's journey who knows a lot, but he wants this hero, he wants Noah specifically, to figure things out himself. And honestly, if Riku told us all the answers, to us as the player, how else would the story have progressed? What surprises would there have been? And especially for Noah, he's a way for Noah to question more of what's going on around him and what's happening in his surroundings in this world. He wants Noah to ask these questions. He wants Noah to kind of think out of the box and think about how he, as well as his party members and his friends, can break free of the system that Mobius has placed on them. I never saw it as a way to throw players off. Well, it still sort of did, but I saw it as an opportunity and a way for us to kind of question everything that is going on. So Riku was sort of, I guess, lying about not knowing what the city is, not knowing who children are, not knowing how babies were made. But Riku also wanted Noah to find the city himself. He wanted Noah to figure things out for himself instead of just dumping all the answers onto him. So I can see where that confusion comes from in this instance, but that's what I gotta say. This is one part of the story and one part of this interview which I personally was confused about. And this is gonna get a little confusing, but I was confused about people's confusion about the city folk. Are you guys confused? Anyways, basically, the city people being born again was pretty obvious to me. I remember in the interview, Takahashi was saying that he saw a lot of questions about what happens to the city folk, what happens to them after the end of the game. To me, it was pretty obvious, and I'll tell you why. The city's whole goal was to free everyone from Mobius's grasp. They wanted to stop Mobius, they wanted to stop Mobius's control over Aionios and the world, and of course effectively just end the war between Keves and Agnes. I'm sure the city folk didn't really know what Origin was and what it would do, but I think they always knew that the end of Mobius would also mean the end of the war, the end of the endless now, and the end of Aionios. The thing is, the city folk never really die. They're just reborn into Bionis and Allrest, and into better worlds. And I remember Monica and Gondor even talking about this near the end of Xenoblade 3, that being born into a better world, being born into a new world is something that they wish for, that's something they aspire for. And even Melia says it herself. I think one of my mutuals on Twitter posted a video specifically where Melia was talking about how a lot of what has happened in Aionios is real in the sense that present lives and future lives are within this world. Present lives such as the main party of Xenoblade 3, but future lives such as the city folk. And it kind of cuts to showing the party members, and then it cuts to Monica herself when she says future lives. So I always thought, hey, Monica, Gondor, Gray, all these people, they're going to be eventually born into Bionis and Allrest, and the silver lining is they'll have better lives. They'll have much happier and better and more fruitful lives than what they had in Aionios and in the city. Just think of all the successful and happy stories and happy memories and moments that Shania can create in the combined worlds of both of the worlds of Bionis and All Rest. And just like Takahashi, I'm not really sure why that in particular was confusing for many fans, because to me, it was pretty clearly stated. Like many confusing things within Xenoblade 3, a lot of it is in the game. It might be hard to kind of figure out, it might be hard to find or remember or understand or decipher, but a lot of it is symbolism, a lot of it is very loosely connected lore, but it's all tying back to the whole message of living your life to the fullest and looking ahead to the future, not being held back by stagnation, not becoming Mobius, not being held back by grudges and negativity and negative emotions and feelings, but looking ahead like Ouroboros does, and forging a new future, forging ahead to a new path and a new world and new opportunities. And Fiora helped with that with Lucky 7. Numa, Pyra, and Mithra helped that with the whole city folk. Whoever used those gauntlets definitely used the power of Pyra and Mithra. And who knows which other party members lent their strength into the world of Aionios within origin metal artifacts. Maybe someone used Ricky's biter in Xenoblade 3. Maybe some of the gears, like Takahashi was saying, have the souls of people like Rhine or Charlo or Dunban. I'm not sure about that, but it kind of goes to show that legacy will remain, but it's up for the future generation to pick up the sword, pick up the blade, and forge ahead to the future, to a new generation and beyond. One thing I really like that Takahashi mentioned is Mobius themselves. He talked about how Mobius is very different from the usual kind of villains that he writes for his stories. You can see in Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, a lot of the villains, aside from like Zanza, are very sympathetic, and even Zanza sort of is. I remember there was a part in Xenoblade 1 where Alvis was saying Zanza just wanted to feel a sense of belonging. He was that side of Klaus that wanted to feel belonging. He wanted to feel friendship, but he never got it and he just took the wrong direction. But you got characters like Egil. You really sympathize with Egil. Egil went through so much, he saw so many people die, and his dreams were crushed. His friend was brainwashed, and his people were annihilated. So what else does he do? But he has to fight back. You see Jin. Jin lost his lover. He lost his purpose. And he doesn't know how to feel about that as a blade within All Rest. So what does he do? He sets out to kill the architect. And then, of course, Malos. Malos has an identity crisis. Is he an agent of destruction? Could he or could he have had a genuinely impactful life that could have changed him as a person in positive ways? So you really truly sympathize with a lot of these villains, and even in Xenoblade 3, you sympathize with N. You see all the things he had to go through. You see all the things Noah had to go through. And then you see what finally changed N's mind and drove him into the path of Mobius. And of course, M, you definitely sympathize with her, even though I don't really consider M to be a villain. But this brings me back to what I was going to say about this. I really like that Takahashi specifically said that Mobius is a very different sort of villainous entity that he created. And it's so different that he goes out of his way to say that these are characters that are straight up evil, and they are characters that establish this sort of system that needs to be broken. They can be an evil politician, they can be a corrupt CEO. They uphold this sort of representation of an unsavory aspect of reality. And he ties that back into Zed's line where he says, all of this just amuses me. He equates that to people who say, it's because I love to make money. It's because I love power. And the funniest part of this is, one of his lines was, it's because 3-star restaurants taste delectable. Imagine if a Mobius came out and said that. Back to the whole topic about Mobius though, I really like that Takahashi did something new with Mobius, and I liked it. It's a whole aspect of reality where people don't want to move forward. They don't want to come out the other side as better people. They want to uphold either old values, unsavory values, evil tendencies and bad tendencies, and just kind of stagnate. And with that stagnation, they will control other people, whether that's groups of people or even just a person in general. You don't really sympathize with them in any way, shape, or form. That's a very bold take and a very bold direction that Takahashi went with this villainous group. And to me, honestly, I know it didn't really work for a lot of people. There is, again, a lot of confusion there. What are Mobius? Who are Mobius? What are their true intentions? What are they trying to do? What do they represent? I think they really fit well in this whole aspect of Xenoblade 3. There is going to be, or there will be, always people who will resist change. They will resist moving forward to a better future. And if those people win, they will want to stay in this endless now. That is what Xenoblade 3 is, and that's what Mobius truly represented. One final thing I want to talk about before I close out this video. I'm rambling quite a bit here, but I want to say how the craziest bit of information we got from this art book, arguably the craziest information, is that Takahashi sort of soft confirmed that Xenoblade 4 is happening. And it's so cool. He actually says it in this interview where he talks about Malos being in End Sword of the End. Not only Logos, we thought it was just the Logos core, but it is actually Malos himself. Malos is back. That's pretty huge. That's a huge deal. It's a pretty massive deal that Malos is back and he's in this sword. We don't know how or when or what could have led to something like that. But that is one thing. Another thing is, as far as I know, as far as I've heard, and I probably would have heard if this was revealed or not, but it doesn't seem like we got confirmation or an actual reveal as to who Mithra's kid is in this art book. And if that's the case, I feel like that is another unanswered question. Another bit of confusing lore that we could learn in a future Xenoblade game. And Takahashi ends off with this in his interview. He says, "With up to Xenoblade 3 finished, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of customers who feel that there isn't enough. They want to know this or that, and that this art book isn't enough to cover all of that. But we have heard those voices from our customers loud and clear. Gradually, I suppose, or in the future, during the creation process, we'd like to respond to those voices, so please look forward to that. That would be it." So to me, what that means is a lot of the questions that we have unanswered. Why is Malos back? What happened to the world that was merged at the end of Future Redeemed? Who is Mithra's kid? A lot of these questions will be answered in the future, in a new saga. You see, the Klaus saga is called the Klaus saga for a reason. Klaus created these worlds, and the whole goal of this Klaus saga was to merge them back together to create a fully unified world once again. The Klaus saga in that way is done. Klaus is finished, like he's finished in Xenoblade 2, he's gone, and the worlds are merged. So Klaus's story is done. I think what is going to spring off of the next saga is this united world, obviously. But what is the catalyst that sets things into motion? I'm not really sure about that. But here's one thing I'm sure of. Xenoblade 3, like I said before, was a story of upholding that legacy, using the legacy of the older generation to establish a new order. I don't think we'll get many callbacks to older party members in what we might know as Xenoblade 4. Probably no Pyramithra, Nia, Melia, Shulk, Rex, none of those people. I think the only remnant from the past might be Mithra's kid, and maybe Malos. And I'm not entirely sure what we could expect from any of this, so Let me know in the comments below what you think about this interesting interview with Tetsuya Takahashi and Monolith Soft's future for Xenoblade Chronicles. Also, do you think Xenoblade 3's lore is confusing, especially after this video? Did I confuse you more with the lore of Fiora, Lucky 7, Xenoblade 1, 2, 3, Origin Avatars, Origin Metal, Riku, the City Folk, Malos and the Sword of the End, any of that? Any of that kind of go over your head? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think about the whole Klaus saga as a whole, now that it's come to an end with Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and join as a member for more additional Nishquick Pops perks. This is Nishquick signing off. Have a great day. Go play some great games today, like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and its amazing expansion pass, Future Redeemed. I'll see you guys in the next one later. Hey guys, this is Nishquick. Thank you so much for watching that video, and special shout out to my Aegis tier members, Durzelblint, 80 2014, and Sam Talks Games. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Thank you so much for watching that video, and if you enjoyed it, check out these videos on the left, and if you haven't subscribed, why not hit the subscribe button on the way out, and consider joining as a Nishquick Pops member for some awesome additional Nintendo and JRPG related perks. I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.